Hey, hey, AfterBuzzers! Welcome to another breakdown of the Romanoffs after show, where we're looking at episode 5, Bright and High Circles. We're going to be looking at a big issue of misconduct that slightly touches upon the hashtag #MeToo movement. Stick around for this episode and all the craziness of it.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Yeah. Hey, this show does a really good thing of just injecting some sudden rap in there, like episode 2. Where did this come from?
This is always the song that I listen to when I make pasta. So
yes, right?
Same.
With your family and everything.
Same.
It's just a nice get-together type of song.
Exactly.
Hello, AfterBuzz, and welcome to another after show for the Romanoffs. We're looking at episode 5, Bright and High Circles. And we're really confronted or thrusted into a very unpleasant and uncomfortable situation yet again, like episode after episode. And so tonight we're actually following, and this is maybe a little known fact, it is from the previous episode, Julia Wells' sister-in-law's life. And that's a point in which Katherine is confronted with a little scrutiny of the piano teacher to her kids, that is being shunned for misconduct. At the beginning, we don't know what it is exactly, but as the story evolves, we do find out what it is, which is rather shocking because everybody expected something else. So we're going to be looking at the misconduct issue, of course, Katherine's method of investigations, as well as how accusations are formed and the perceptions of that. And we'll be looking at our special segment, which we had to sadly miss last week, but we're bringing it in this week since there was quite a few touches upon notable authors and poets as well, like Tolstoy and Pushkin. So I'm your host, Yasmine Tanres, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host.
I'm Emmy Maestri. Very excited to be back with you, Yasmine.
Yay. The 5th episode after Thanksgiving. Hey.
Yeah. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was amazing. How was yours?
Good.
Thank you.
I ate so much food and had so much wine. It's great.
Watching this as well then is like another added layer to it. So before we get into all of our topics and our special segment, what did you think about this episode overall?
It was a slow build for me, slow burn a little bit. There's a lot of things that I liked about it and a lot of things that I didn't like about it, like simultaneously, I feel like. I think, as always, the performances were incredible to watch, but I feel like there were some character choices and some things that didn't quite line up with what I kind of thought these people would be thinking or the way that they would act. And just, I know we're going to get heavy into the Me Too stuff on this because that's a whole thing to unpack.
Yeah, we got to touch upon that because there's been a lot out there about this episode. And it's very fascinating because I felt like watching it on the first hand, being absorbed into the story, I was more sort of immersed into Katherine's internal conflict of her having to deal with the fact that a piano teacher that is with her kids is being faulted for some form of misconduct. And of course, she doesn't know at the time. And so the way that she's unraveling it, I felt like, okay, that's a very prevalent issue as well to look into, the other spectrum of parents having to deal with such an issue, how they're going to deal with it with their kids. So going into that straight up, I mean, overall, I thought as well, like characters, I mean, the acting was phenomenal. It was just all a little bit confusing. Again, like every episode, there's a bit of an open ending where you're like, wait, what? It's got that, wait, what? Factor, I swear.
It really does. Actually at Thanksgiving, one of my good friends who has a lot of the same TV interests as I do, she asked me, she was like, should I watch it? I was like, yes. And she was like, why? And I was like, okay, I'm going to talk for like 20 minutes at you right now. Because there's so much to talk about with it. And like, it's so weird and different and interesting, but also like, I don't know. It's just, and that's why I like doing the show for it too, because it's so fun to talk about after.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that you have to talk about because it's a 90-minute show and every episode is different, like completely different. Although there are some little tidbits that connect people, as we've established. And this one I think was lesser known, that it was Julia Wells' sister-in-law that we were dealing with in this case. So let's jump into the whole misconduct issue, because the opening sequence was like beautifully set up with this whole musical act, and you could feel and see the love of people rooting for David, how he's changed so many lives and really professed towards the kids nourishment in instruments and everything. And so, what were your overall thoughts first up of David? And just in general, actually, not even just first up, but because we don't really see that much of him. We just hear of him through people, and just in the first instance, do we see him at present?
That's a good point. Yeah, just because it really is up front. You just see little bits of, of him as a character, and it's more the reaction of people. Like the one mom getting up and like praising him and them all cheering for. I mean, like you almost forgot that the kids just did a recital because they all loved him so much, which I almost was like, that's a little overkill.
Right? Like I also thought Cheryl was that mother who was like, whoa, what is her response? Like she adores him. And then throughout when they have this little not disagreement, but it was a bit of an awkward moment between Katherine and Cheryl that I kind of questioned at some point, wait, is she like in love with him or something? But it turns out he is gay, so of course that maybe, I mean, who knows in this case.
She probably is still in love with him.
Or maybe he's bisexual, who knows.
I thought she was about to throw him up over her shoulder at one point and just carry him out in a parade. Like, my goodness, it was
like
a lot.
He's her shining armor and everything. But I got a sense of him being first up, a very like kind heart, sweet soul. Although he was a little bit awkward, and he has a funny side to him. He was trying to do the whole Jar Jar Binks voice with the tiramisu, and then you could sense then there was some form of a tension between him and Alex, and it was just kind of questioning like, what is that tension? And then I thought, oh, he's not getting his check until Kevin's like, oh, I'm so sorry about it.
Yeah.
But I also felt like he was trying to suck up to David for some reason.
Yeah, you could kind of see that. And I don't know if it's just maybe kind of like a dude thing where he's just kind of looking, like he knows he has all the support from the women in the community, but like maybe not so much the men, because all the women kind of like there was even that joking line of like, well, he's your boyfriend, he's all your boyfriend, like, so I think it's kind of him maybe trying to find a way in with the guys too.
That's an interesting point.
But it's very forced and awkward when he tries to, so of course it doesn't work.
Yes. I mean, we see throughout how he's trying to suck up to him and pitching him ideas and everything, and the dad's just completely not having any of it.
Nope.
Well, going into our first topic of misconduct, I want to touch upon the dad first up, just very briefly, because he goes, Benji, he swears tiramisu has got to go. Where I'm like, you don't really swear like that in front of your kids that young, do you?
Yeah. I was very confused by his character overall. He was like, when I was talking about the character choices that I didn't always agree with, at first he just seemed like good dad, solid, but away a lot maybe. So, like he travels a lot, got that. But then, like, he lashed out at his kid for having tiramisu in the fridge.
Yeah.
Was swearing at him.
F word as well. All the while they're playing this Akon Ludacris song, Drop Down.
I just felt like it was a very strange moment. And then he went from immediately being like, oh, yeah, he probably did something. I always had a bad feeling about him, to defending him when he was like, oh, it's probably just beer that he got him. I was like, what is your deal? I was very thrown off by his character.
It was very confusing. And I think the whole thing about being very confused about the entire premise of this episode itself is really a reflection of the confusion of the realities of things that are being brought forward, right? A lot of people are confused. I think it goes on both sides, whether you're confused of bringing forth the situation, because how is that going to respond on you and also on that person, right? And then being confused overall from other people's perspective of who to believe.
Yeah.
So I think they did a great job in not having us root really for anybody. I mean, that's personally how I felt. I don't know about you guys, but if you felt like, you could abide to a character in this episode, I'd love to hear. I mean, what did you think? Like, were you able to root for anybody in this, or just kind of follow through the segues of it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because no, I don't think I did either, because at every turn you're kind of like, oh, I do kind of believe him, or I don't believe her, or whatever it was. And I think they did a good job of not letting us know who made the accusation either, or what the accusation was.
Oh, okay, so touching upon that, did you think it was correct, the way in which FBI agent Guterres, I hope I'm saying this correctly. I try to put my best Spanish accent. So the way that she comes into the school and then tells Katherine, and of course Katherine's like, naturally as a mom, very worried as to what is going on. Do you think that situation in that moment was dealt properly on both sides? Because Katherine was really pushing to know what's going on when she shouldn't have overstepped that barrier. But of course, the agent was like, in the end, okay, telling her, but just keep it down low. What did you think of that?
Yeah, it was kind of a weird scene. I liked it, though, because she came in and was so, like, extremely professional, like, overly professional almost, like, very kind. And then she was just like, well, I can't tell you anything. And, she's doing her job. But, yeah, I felt like it was a weird, like, the fact that she could never get back in touch with her. And then she was like, oh, yeah, my partner was out of town. And I don't know. That was one of the things that left me kind of, like, wanting to know a little bit more.
Yeah, I really thought at one point, is this a play? Is this put on by David himself to check on how much the moms love him or not? I don't know. Everything seemed so weird. And we're going to delve back into David because there are a few things like the accusations and some of the stories that unraveled about him or that he had put forth that were not true. So before we get into Katherine's methods of investigations, because ultimately, she was then saying to the FBI agent, oh no, you speak to my kids. I'm not going to do it, but in the end she does. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, you've got a little message for our AfterBuzzers, don't you?
I do, yeah. I wanted to let you guys know that our network does produce after shows for nearly all of your favorite TV shows. So from dramas, reality TV, sci-fi, and more, there's no network that works harder to serve television fans like you guys. But we do need your help. We are asking that you please subscribe to one or more of our YouTube channels. So whether it's dramas, comedies, any of them reality, make sure you hit that subscribe button for us, because by subscribing to our channel, YouTube will suggest content that's tailor-made for you, and you'll help AfterBuzz continue to grow. And if you're worried about pesky notifications, do not be, because they are optional, so you can turn those suckers off. So hit that subscribe button now for this channel, and check out our other AfterBuzz channels as well. Let us know you did so in the comments, and we'll make sure to thank you on air. And thank you so much for being the best fans and for helping us become the ESPN of TV talk.
Absolutely.
Heyo.
And like every episode, we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments, because each episode has just been so open up in the air, and it's always nice to have that conversation and different perspectives of people. So yeah. I have a question. Would you have dealt the way Katherine had dealt with the investigation? Would you have spoken with the kids, or would you have let the FBI agent deal with the matter?
It's tough. I think if they were going to be able to deal with it quickly, I would say maybe, like a joint, like if I could be in the room as they're questioning, something like that. But also I can understand, like, you just want to know, like, you just had, like, if you think that your kids were somehow put in a dangerous or uncomfortable or inappropriate situation, you're going to want to ask them right away.
Yes, it's a very delicate situation.
Yeah.
Because first of all, not knowing what the misconduct is, but then ultimately, because of the prevalence of things that go on, there was this sort of expectation or thought that it was sexual in nature. And that goes to our next topic of accusations that we'll get into later. But I thought it was very interesting how she tried to ask the kids one by one, of course, starting with the older one who was at college making out with his girlfriend. It was interesting how he then raised, he did make inappropriate jokes that were sexual in nature. I almost felt like that should have been elaborated a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think it was a really strong choice from the writers to have 3 different aged boys all having to be asked the same thing, to kind of get each one's different perspective. And of course, the older one, just saying something like that wouldn't leave me feeling very comfortable or confident as a mom, just knowing that much. And also, at what point was that, because I mean, he's now in college, but were those jokes when he was, teaching with him when he was 10 or when he was 15 or 16? Like, it still doesn't make it okay, but it still changes it too.
Exactly. I mean, now that you say the 3 boys, I'm like wondering why they didn't put a girl in there actually.
It'd be interesting, because with him being a gay teacher, And then if there was a girl in there too, yeah, like what her experience
has
would.
he like taught other girls? Has he just been teaching boys?
Yeah.
You know, like it's just
Yeah.
a lot of open questions there, and you just don't really get to know the truth of it all. And I think that's again a reflection of reality as well. And then how Katherine goes on to question the younger son, the middle son, and Henry. Is it Henry? Yes.
Yeah.
And he's just like very defensive about the fact that she's asking him this question. I almost felt like when he said, and I must say, I thought it was a funny introduction of him weighing with the typewriter. It's just like, he's like this whiz, I must say. Pianist, Karate Kid, typewriter, clearly a writer as well.
Yeah, they did a good job of like building that character throughout of like, he's totally like the overachiever, like the prize son. He's helping his mom cook dinner. He's asking to get the dad's luggage to bring it in, you know, like.
Completely, yes,
that
out
kid.
of the three, yes.
Yeah.
But he was just so, he was so defensive, and I just almost felt like, oh, is there maybe something going on between them two?
Yeah, when it got so defensive so quickly, and then he started like accusing her of all, you know, like just being harsh to like anyone who's employed by her and kind of going off in a different direction. I almost didn't like that it did that because it kind of muddied the waters more. And when the show, again, when it's something that like, if this was a feature, I'd rather see it muddied because then they'll have more time to explore it after. But yeah, because my initial reaction walking away from that scene was, okay, maybe he has done something inappropriate with him.
I really question that. And I guess that's why it ultimately led to also forcing Katherine to then ask Benji, the youngest son, which must have been the most difficult because he's so young and you don't want to taint that sort of a mindset with something like that. Or, you know, the thing is, again, it's like, it's so unclear as to what the misconduct was, but people ultimately expect or think directly into the worst case scenario, I feel. I think that's something innate in humanity in general, right?
Yeah.
So it was interesting, Henry's response, and obviously that tilted her to ask Benji. You know, she had a little moment of reflection during the night where she, it was a moment in which they moved into the new house, and then he's giving her this heartfelt speech, and, you know, you got a glimpse of him being such a nice guy. And so that, again, was confusing to me as to, hey, is he the bad guy or not, right?
Yeah, and I think he did a really great job in this of just, you never could quite tell if it was genuine or not. Because he was always so nice and so friendly. And then, you know, I'm sure we'll get into this later, but like that moment when he was making fun of the other mom, like her kitchen. And so, you know, like he's just like a
That
catty.
was kind of
like,
funny.
Yeah.
And I will say that's kind of a snide comment, but you know, when people gossip, they kind of make those funny jokes, and it's not, I don't think he meant it in a bad way.
Yeah.
Or,
So,
I don't know. Hopefully he wasn't that maleficent. Sorry, I'm throwing a bunch of words that I'm tripping over here tonight.
I think he was just trying too hard in a lot of cases. So I was never really clear on, you know, if he actually was being genuine or not. And especially after we find out that he lied about so much.
Ooh, yes.
So it was hard for me to tell, but I think so much credit to Diane Lane for the scenes of talking to all three of the boys.
Yes.
Because she was phenomenal in all of those scenes. Because what an awful conversation to have with not one of your kids, but three of them.
Yes. Although I think, okay, appropriately she asked the elder ones first and the way she asked them. But I felt like the younger one, I think she should have been a little bit more delicate with that. Because he was really thrown off. He's like, no, ew, that's weird.
Yeah.
And so I felt like she should have thought about her wording better in this case.
And you can tell she is like totally like that's kind of her personality. You know, like she is a strong ass lady. Like you can tell like she gets stuff done.
Yes, yes.
So,
she's like super mom, does it all.
yeah.
Well, let's get into our next topic of accusations, because that is a real big one when you're bearing false witness. So it's a little play with morality right here. And there's a sentence, I quote, "I should be prepared to be misunderstood." That is raised in this episode.
Yeah.
And that's like, why was that even mentioned, right? By Paul McCartney, who said that initially. And so it's really touching upon the whole premise, which a lot of backlash has been on for this episode.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately as well, and I want to just quickly touch upon why Pushkin's poem was brought up, because the episode surrounds that as well, which Katherine reads with her students. And what I want to read is this part that says, so it defends a friend whose name has been besmirched by gossip's noise, hypocritical damnation. Try to forget the whole stuff. Don't drink the poison. Outrageous. Leave that high circle, bright and close. Leave crazy merriments and pleasure. You still have one good friend of yours. To me, that felt like the poem is a reflection of what she thinks of David and the situation. So this whole internal conflict versus what is being presented in reality, which she at this point doesn't really know. But she's like supposed to be keeping it to herself to the point, you know, until something really is unraveled, because right now it's just the questioning stages to see from other mothers' perspective if David had done something wrong. But she then ends up telling Cheryl.
Yeah, so I think the whole concept of this episode was just really ill-conceived at the end of the day. I think the timing of it with the message that it ended on and the way that, yeah, like you said, like her kind of like going through this poem and hearing these things, and I just feel like it was a very poor decision to have this episode with this showrunner who has been accused in the past, and to kind of take it the way that they did, because there were so many times where you heard things that are like in the media every day. I mean, quotes some of it in the episode, oh, you think she ruined his life because of a joke, that it's a witch hunt, they were just jokes, it's just an accusation. A good person doesn't ruin somebody's life because of some random accusation. They said accusation probably 100 times.
Lot, yes, and we're mentioning it probably 100 times too. But it's so true, and I think it's interesting to me because it was co-written, but with a female writer, and so it's just like, I wonder how this was being pushed forward. At what point was this written as well?
Yeah, exactly. Like when this was actually drafted up, because it does just seem, it's weird. I'm happy that it didn't really like give us anything definitive, because I just like storylines like that. But I think when you're dealing with something like this, and again, when, you know, the showrunner is someone who's actively been accused of things, you have to tread a little bit more lightly. So I just don't think this was a necessary episode.
Yeah,
I liked parts of it, but I don't think it was necessary overall.
See, on the one hand, I was questioning, you know, whether going by what had been displayed out there by the media, if it was purposeful with this message, and clearly it seems to be with all the quotes and, you know, the hidden things, but there was a lack of morale in this, and that's what pains me slightly. So I wished and hoped they would have done a better job with the ending in that sense. And there's, quite a few reflections upon that. But let's go back into the story. Cheryl then, she does become mad initially about what Katherine said, like, wow. But then she kind of twists, like she changes her mind and perspective about David, recounting these situations of what you had mentioned with the Versailles and Debbie's reaction.
Yeah.
So what did you think of Cheryl's reaction? Like, why do you think she all of a sudden changed her mind? What made her change her mind all of a sudden?
Yeah, and I feel like by the end of the conversation, she almost went back again, too. Because, I mean, regardless of if you think that someone has done something inappropriate or any kind of sexual harassment or anything like that, he's just straight up been lying to everyone.
Exactly. Like, she even picks up upon it because she brings it forth about how he mentioned to her that he comes from a lineage of the Romanoffs, which ultimately is Katherine's story, and then how his business failed because of his partner running off with the money that Katherine had been given him, apparently, which she had no clue. Well, maybe it's the funding of all the payments for the piano lessons, but like, it should have clicked at that point to Cheryl that something's off, because Katherine's mind already something's off, because that's ever since the FBI agent approached her. But like in Cheryl's mind, like, what is going on to make her defend him like that?
That's what
as
I was
well,
like,
just like Henry.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it. And especially like from an adult who is seeing these lies come out. And like you said, like kind of a lack of morality in this episode, even on something like that.
Yeah.
Again, regardless of these horrible accusations, like he's just straight up lying to every single parent about different things. And like, and again, I think it goes to that kind of like suave kind of figure he tries to hold up. And we really don't know anything about him at the end.
And the thing is, what's interesting is that when Katherine brings it forward to her husband, Alex, she's just like, he lied about the story and this is what happened. Did you know any of this? And he's like, no, why don't you fire him or something, right? And then in the end, he changes his mind about the entire situation because the misconduct resulted in him buying beer for a kid.
So much back and forth. Like,
it's
these
just
people cannot pick a
interesting to
side.
see male perspective versus female perspective to the reactions of moments like these,
Yeah, that's true. Because I mean, early on, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, of course, like Alex is going to be kind of defensive of like, oh yeah, I should have known this guy. Like almost like a typical like chauvinistic male, like perspective that you're like, oh yeah, that's what I would expect from that guy. But then he flips it around and is like, oh no, yeah, it's fine. He just bought them beer. That's not a big deal.
And we don't even know if it was beer. We don't even know if it was beer or hard liquor. But either way, he just kind of just lets it go.
Yeah.
And I had to write this down where Catherine's like, a mother would have fired him straight up. Versus Alex says, a good person wouldn't shun a person over accusations. Where I'm like...
Yeah.
You just ultimately in the beginning, you worried and knew you had a bad feeling about him because of his sexuality and being with boys. But then you change your mind because of the result of the misconduct, which we don't even know if it's the truth.
Yeah.
We don't even know if there was actually a misconduct there, right?
Yeah.
Like the whole thing with the agent just disappearing for a week and being so blasé.
Yeah.
It was just bizarre. Because and going into that point then, how the guitarist she just asks Katherine in the end what's he like, and then Katherine just had to say he actually was a good teacher, because she recounts the moment in which Benji finds him. No, the first son, was it Benji?
The oldest one,
Henry finds him.
Oh yeah, Henry. Yeah, when Henry was younger, yeah.
Yes, because it was
there.
the flashback. And this goes to another point of accusations in the school. It was an interesting moment. And actually, I enjoyed this, that they put 2008 to make us know, oh yeah, that was 10 years ago. And how the teacher was saying to Katherine, your kid is running around naked in school. This is inappropriate and it's just hindering everybody else's learning curve. You should, basically telling her to be more at home. I thought, in my opinion, that was inappropriate of the teacher to raise.
Yeah, and the way that she did it too, and just the way that she responded to everything that Katherine would say, I was just like, I don't like you.
Yeah.
And so
and I guess it was like a nice flip moment to then see, hey, this little kid actually does deserve some form of attention and playfulness, and that's what he found through listening to the piano and wanting to play it as well, or being encouraged by David. So I felt like through other people's perspectives, we were able to see, and especially through Katherine's perspective, of him actually being an endearing, kind person. Mm-hmm. But I'm still questioning everything because of Alex's little story on Ellen or Alan or who, what, when, why. What did you think about that?
That was one of those things where at the end I was just like, okay, so because everyone thought that he was a boy and then it turns out that she was actually a girl, Ellen, that is what makes me think that David is guilty of something, alongside just the fact that his creepiness level kind of rose throughout the episode for me quite a bit with all the lies and everything too. But I feel like to me that was their way of saying like, yeah, something probably did go down.
Yeah. What I felt like was just, it was a bit extreme because I felt like, Alex was trying to take on the role of his father of what happened back then when he had questioned Alan if he really was a girl. I don't think there's any, as kids we're curious, we're going to ask these kind of questions. And yes, we should not ask questions to offend anybody. I do agree with that. But the way that he said, when you accuse somebody of something, whether they did it or not, you make everybody look at them differently. Mm-hmm. Yes, okay, we've seen that. Yeah. Bearing false witness is the worst crime that you can commit. Otherwise, anyone can say anything about anybody. That's definitely not the worst crime. there's way worse crimes, like killing.
Yeah.
And just saying it can ruin their life. No matter what they did, does that seem fair? It's not fair. In your heart, you have to stretch yourself, make everything as it was. It's the right thing. I'm like, what did they mean by in your heart, you have to stretch yourself, make everything as it was?
Yeah.
Ooh.
And I think that goes along with where this episode kind of misses the mark for me and the tone of it, because lines like moments like that, and when it's spent pretty much the whole time people basically trying to find a way to say that David's got to be innocent. And that's the whole problem with culture right now.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the tone throughout it, and then ending on a note like that, is where I think a lot of people got upset and where it just kind of missed the mark for me.
Yeah. And likewise for myself, and especially in the moment of when she was hesitant about closing the door or not, I felt like she shouldn't have closed the door. It's just her place. She can rightfully just leave the door open and they can just play piano there, And
Yeah.
there's a review by Alan Sepinwall in the Rolling Stones that said, it's saying that what David does as an artist is ultimately so valuable that any questions about his behavior or character should be treated as distasteful noise to be tuned out. And I don't know if I should agree with him or not. Like, I wouldn't want to, because that shouldn't be the case at all. But this episode really didn't. It left us all it left it wobbly, very wobbly.
Yeah.
Is what I will say. So I want us to get into our news and gossip.
Yeah.
Because there's so much about this one.
Good lead in there. Well, so to kind of ripple off of that, The Atlantic had an article about this as well. And the poem that you mentioned earlier, they were saying, that the poem expresses solidarity with someone whose reputation is being slandered. Pushkin, a notorious womanizer for what it's worth, seems to rage against cruel accusations and hypocritical damnation and advises the subject to rise above them. And this sets the theme of Bright and High Circle, which is about vague, gossipy accusations leveled at a piano teacher, David Patton, in a wealthy community in Los Angeles. So I think that one paragraph there sums up so much of what people are thinking about this episode, that it's a good story to tell, but it's coming from the wrong place in a way. So there's a lot of articles out there right now. If you literally just put in anything about the Romanoffs right now, these are this is one of the top episodes that comes up just that people are talking about. So I think we kind of wanted to just touch on this for our news and gossip this week, just so we could hear a little bit more from you guys too. So make sure, whether it's in the live chat now or after the show, in the comment section on YouTube, let us know kind of your thoughts on the tone of the episode and kind of where you think it plays into the Me Too movement, if it's something that's pro or negative, that plays into all of it.
Yeah, that's a really great piece. I think, it's very interesting how it was written, definitely, to have sort of a gay male person being the one that's construed for this, and then having the three boys, but it's uncomfortable, the whole situation.
Yeah.
And it's also from the side of Katherine, how she has to deal with it within the story, let's say, but then for the viewer of the bigger spectrum of what is going on today.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, Tony, what were your thoughts on this one?
What was that?
What were your thoughts on this one? And then kind of this whole, what people are saying about the episode afterwards.
Oh, I didn't really have the chance to look into what's happening afterwards, out of the microcosm. I personally like to just watch a piece of work and then try to forget about the outside until the very end. But yeah, so putting me on the spot real quick.
You're welcome.
I just really enjoyed that it's like a microcosm for what happened, what we saw with Kavanaugh, or what we saw with Matthew Weiner, right?
Yeah.
And how these things can start. It's like a cool little like a social experiment. Like, hey, here's this agent that's gonna come up and be like, by the way, your piano teacher that hangs out with all your students, yeah, he has something to do with misconduct. We're not gonna tell you exactly what, but we're gonna plant that seed right in your head, and then we're like, oh, and by the way, we're gonna like cut you off for another week or so, right? So plants the seed in her head. Then she goes off and by the way, she tells them, don't tell anyone. The first thing she does, goes and tells everything. She starts this wildfire of just like, oh no, this piano teacher might have done something with our kids. although nothing has been proven yet, nor does she even know what he's being accused of. So they've just they fan these weird flames of something that just is not even true. And I just appreciated how it's a little experiment, or it's a little window. It's like, hey, by the way, this is how that can happen. This is how I am accused of something that I did not even do yet. And this is how the witch hunt of, say, social media or these moms just start going after me without even, I'm not even being accused of anything yet. I just thought it was interesting to show that, as in, like, it's like a little like an ant farm, pretty much.
Ooh.
Like, this episode is an ant farm for all of that.
Ant farm. For somebody who was just like put on the spot, you seem very heated about this aspect. Especially about Catherine's way of being like, don't tell anybody. And then she does end up. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely very interesting. I do feel like, you know, if you see something or hear something or feel something is wrong, it is definitely a question of whether to raise it or not. Because a lot of ethics falls behind it. There's strong sentiments as to, you know, what is the result going to be? How's this going to look like for you as well as for that person? And what are the consequences for each of you, right? And so you're definitely taking a risk in all factors. But she's a mother. She wants to, like, protect her kids and, like, find out. And But, you know, yes, I mean, she maybe shouldn't have spoken to Cheryl about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I agree going to the people directly related, which would be her children, right? And the actual power she has over her children. So I would agree, yeah, go for your children. But then she goes and blabs to the other moms, and I'm just like, okay, this is where it starts. Like, this is how it starts. It was a self-contained fire with her and her children, you know, and that was, although it's terrible, it's still a fire. But you don't want the fire to spread. But she goes ahead and just, like, grabs some fire and throws it at other people's houses and be like, hey, by the way. I don't know. It was fairly interesting.
To try and forewarn them, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely a good teaching to basically say, you know, do not spread anything unless it has been verified and is certain. And that goes down with fake news and everything else that is out there now within society and spoken about within news and culture. So definitely a fair point. Okay, let's quickly jump into our special segment. It's a few of these famous Russian authors that had been mentioned throughout in the past 2 episodes, especially. So we've had a mention of Tolstoy and Pushkin. Yes, bring on the little Russian music. And actually, you know, there was great music in this episode. And in no particular order, we had starting off with Alexander Pushkin, okay, hailed as the Russian Shakespeare and as the founder of literary poetry during the golden era of poetry in Russia. Major work includes Eugene Onegin. So for anybody who is interested in knowing a little bit more about Russian culture and literature, we're just going to name 5 right now. So next up, Mikhail Bulgakov, I'm sorry I'm butchering these names, claimed as one of the most controversial writers of his time and famous for his satires on the society in Soviet Union. His most significant work is The Master and Margarita. How funny. Anton Chekhov, acknowledged as the greatest short fiction writer in history. His most influential work is The Seagull and Uncle Vanya. And then Ivan Bunin was the first Russian author to be awarded with a Nobel Prize in Literature. His acclaimed work include The Village in Dry Calais. And finally, Leo Tolstoy, which is personally one of my favorites. Anna Karenina was really one of my favorites during school. Actually called as Count, he's actually called Count Lev Nikolaevich Tolstoy. And his most popular works are War and Peace. Huge book, like a really long read, but definitely very powerful. And of course, Anna Karenina. So yeah, we've had quite like, you know, we always try and feed you with a bit of knowledge, Russian knowledge, and because the past 2 episodes have been heavily focused on authors, literature, and poetry, we thought to feed you a little bit of that.
Very cool. I like that. This is a fun segment. I like getting to hear a little bit more of it, and also I would be, oh my goodness, thank God you're doing this segment.
Where do we go? I took Russian for a year. I still don't have this down. I should have this down with more practice, I swear. Well, any final thoughts or anything about, and you know, we usually, because there are no predictions to be able to be made with this anthology, but you know, I guess we can kind of try and predict what was going to continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a prediction, I think it kind of goes on business as usual, which I don't know that I agree with because, again, I mean, he's this creepy guy who's been lying to everyone while he's teaching their kids and going into their houses without anyone else around. Like, you're not best friends.
Yeah.
Don't come into my house.
I'm also really curious about Alex, the father, who's just like, oh yeah, it was Ellen, it was a girl. Like, I want to know more about this. Like, how did Katherine just let that slide as well? So
yeah, so I think
I feel like there's some marital issues that might come up sometime later.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope not, though. I want a happy family in this. Okay, well, that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do chime into the conversation. Let us know your thoughts about this episode, whether it really touched upon the hashtag #MeToo movement and everything that goes behind it with the creators, or, you know, the focus of Katherine delving into having to explain to her kids the whole misconduct issue, the morality of this whole premise. So, with that being said, how can we find you, Amy, on social media?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Amy Maestri.
And you can find me at Yasmine Tanres. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next Monday at 6 p.m.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.